So in lesson 3, we're going to start looking at how do we find minimum and maximum values within arrays. So we're actually going to work through minimum entirely together, and then you'll actually work through maximum as you complete your exercise for this lesson. So our goal by the end of today is that we can find the maximum element in an array and that we can find the minimum element contained inside of an array. So where we're going to start is we're going to jump in and create a program that has a list that stores 8 different names. So we're going to jump right in. We'll get into Python, go. Then from here, file, new file. We'll do file, save as. And then from here, we want to go into our documents. Sorry, hold on. There we go. Unit 7. And then we're going to do Unit 7, Lesson 3. And this is going to be on finding minimum values in. Okay, so if we do Unit 7, Lesson 3, and this one is going to find the minimum value in an array. Now, what we're going to do to start is we are going to just create a program that does the following. So it asks the user to enter in 8 names. It stores the 8 names into an array called nameArray, and it essentially ensures that the name is written with capital letter first only because it's a name. So we're going to start by asking or basically creating the array that we want to store the values in. So we need definition main to start off our program. And then from here, we're going to create the array to store all of the entered names. And here we just want to create a blank array to start, and then we'll be adding and appending to it as we go, as the user enters in their values. So we have name array, and that is equal to just the square brackets implying that it is an empty array. Then from here, we want them to enter in 8 names. So what I like to do is use a loop because it allows me to reuse code very, very easily. So I'm going to do for I in range 8. So this is going to cycle through 8 times. So basically I'm creating an array or create a loop that cycles 8 times because remember that cycles from 0 to 7. So then inside of here, we want to ask our user to enter in a name. So I'm going to do name equals, and I'll do input. Please enter in a name. So this is the user, if you want to add a good comment, user adding in names. And then once we have that name, we want to make sure that that name is capitalized. So we'll do name equals name dot capitalize. There we go. So remember, this is a function that will capitalize a string and re-saves it because we're saving it back inside of name. So this goes back to chapter 5 when we studied those string functions. This is a string function that will take the name, capitalize the first letter, and then make sure that the rest are all lowercase. And then from here, the last thing I want to do once I have that name is I want to add this to the array. So I'm going to do name array dot append. Remember, append is what adds a value to an array. And here we're going to put name because we want to add whatever name is to the array. And this will happen 8 times, so we'll add 8 different names to the array. So this adds a value to the array. And we're adding all of those names in there. So here we have our finished loop, and again, it's going to cycle 8 times, get a name from the user, capitalize that name, and add it to our array. So that's the first piece here. So this loop's purpose is to get 8 names from the user and add them to the array, which is exactly what it does. Then the next thing we want to do here is we want to output those. So we're going to use another loop because loops are a great way to repeat code. And this loop is going to print all the items in the array to the screen. So here we'll do we'll just pick a different variable here, for j in name array. So here I'm using a different type of for loop. This is going to cycle through all the entries for all of the items in the array. So using this type of for loop, for I in not range, but the array name instead, we'll cycle through all the values in that array. Then from here, I'm just going to print j the screen. So I'm going to print each item to the screen. Just to make sure this works, I'm going to run it. So I'm going to do main with the parentheses. Remember, this is what runs the main program. And then here I'm going to run and just test that this works. So it's going to ask me to enter in 8 names. So we'll do Sarah, Laura, Jack, Taylor, Michael, Alec, Alyssa, let's see who else, Evan, and there we go. So we answered it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 names. Then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all of the values in that array printed out. So I can see that we're storing 8 names. What I can also test is see if it'll change it to a capital. So say I did this wrong. Say I did them all lowercase. Sarah, Laura, Jack, Michael, Alec, Alyssa, Taylor, Evan. Look at how it capitalizes them all before it puts them in the array. So we can see that our array is working and functioning as we would expect. So now we're going to start looking through and seeing how we can find the minimum value in our array now that we're printing everything out to the screen and we can see that it works. So I'm going to put a little print line here. This is just a blank line to separate out parts of my program. This is just a blank line to add some space to it. So the next thing I'm going to do, there we go. So we have that added. We're now going to output the first name in the alphabet. So the user is going to enter in 8 names. And what we want to do is once they've entered in their 8 names, we want to find the first word alphabetically. So I don't have those names still saved, but if I run these, essentially what I want my program to do is I'm going to enter in all of these names again. There we go. And what I'm going to want my program to do is look through all 8 of these names and find the first alphabetically. So in this particular set, it would say that Alyssa is the first name alphabetically. We want it to be able to find it regardless of the order that the user enters in the values to this program. So we got to think through how we're going to do this exactly. And I'm going to type out some thoughts here. So there are a couple of different ways to go about this. There's one particular strategy that I like to use because it just helps me to go one at a time and check, okay, is the first one the first alphabetically? Is the second one the first alphabetically? So what I'm going to do is, this is kind of a weird approach to it, but I'm going to assume that the first word is, or the first entry is the first alphabetically. And then essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare it to the second word. Now remember, using the ASCII code, that A comes before B, ASCII code-wise. B comes before C, ASCII code-wise. So we can use the ASCII code and essentially alphabetically, so the first words alphabetically, I'm going to add a little note here, will have the lowest ASCII code stop value. So you can see it's auto-correcting on me. That's what I know. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to assume that the first entry is the first alphabetically. I'm going to compare it to the second one. If the second word is lower when it comes to the ASCII code, I'm going to then change what comes first alphabetically. So it becomes the new lowest or first alphabetical word. So essentially, I'm going to go through that list of names and I'm going to run this program one more time so we can see it in action. And then I'll explain how I'm going to code it. So I have Sarah, Laura, Evan, Jack, Kyle, Michael, Alyssa, Alec, etc.